Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 13 of the State of Craft. Excited to have the Craft Cannabis Association of BC with me here today. I'll introduce Teresa and Sarah in a little bit. First off, I want to introduce myself. I'm Sami, the CEO of CertiCraft. We're on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. And our flagship product is a compliance platform that makes staying on top of all the regs and reports and records and all that jazz super easy. The State of Craft is a series to just facilitate discussions with really cool and respected people in the craft cannabis industry on the state of craft, the legal craft cannabis industry here in Canada. We basically just ask our guests what they think is going well, what's not going well, and what can be done to improve those things that aren't going well. And that's the gist of the series. We have a chat, which I see some of you are using. Glad to see you there. Please say hi and yeah, Sarah does have amazing wall art. Please say hi and introduce yourselves and comment in there. If you have any questions for Sarah or Teresa, we have a dedicated questions tab. And the way the format works here is we will have a discussion for the first 45 minutes. And then at the end, we'll go through all the questions and answer them at that point in time in a Q&A. You can upvote questions that you like, and we'll just go in questions by order of upvotes. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the lovely Teresa and Sarah. Hi, guys.
Hi, Sami. Hi, everyone.
Do you guys want to? Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for being here. Do you guys want to each maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves before we learn about all the other things that you guys have on your minds?
Sure. We'll try to be brief. I think Teresa and I both have a pretty extensive history here. But, so I'm Sarah Campbell. I moved to BC from Ontario in 1998, and I got connected with the Vancouver Island Compassion Society pretty much right away. Basically from 2000 to 2009, those were the activism years. There were several court cases. I definitely wanted to mention today that, we worked with a community of patients and activists, and we were all part of this cause, access to a plant medicine. And in those early years, we lost a lot of people who, critically and chronically ill patients who really took the stand in several court cases to help us get where we are today as to have access. So we shouldn't forget those folks. So during, after that, it was a whirlwind. We had the unregulated industry grew. In 2012, I got my business degree at Railroads University, and I started my own edibles company called Sweetgrass Extracts. My partner and I started a seed company called House of the Great Gardener based on some of the genetics that he was working with at the Vancouver Island Compassion Society. And we had an amazing few years traveling around the world at trade shows. We won a lot of international awards for hash making in particular. I won third place at the Legends of Hash, hosted by Marcus Bubbleman in Amsterdam. I think I was the first woman to win an award there. So really, we were part of a global cannabis community, and that's something else we should all know, is that there is a global cannabis community, a global craft cannabis community, I'd like to say, that's been around forever. And it's very similar to what we experience here in Canada around the world. There's this natural connection between us all because of this plant, and it's a beautiful thing. And we should really try to maintain that culture as Canada storms the world, with our legalization efforts. We really should try to keep this culture alive because it is a beautiful thing. Legalization happens, and so then a group of legacy folks and myself decided to form the Craft Cannabis Association of BC to make sure we had voices for the small farmers. So we've been at that for a few years. This year, my team and I received our micro-cultivation license, Great Gardener Farms, and that was in May. And so we've just been working really hard since then to try to, adhere to our SOPs and understand what compliance means, and see what the market will allow. And we're hopefully on the verge of a craft designation in BC.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And welcome to the whirlwind of post licensing in this regulatory market that we find ourselves in today.
Thank you. You guys are helping us, CertiCraft. So thank you very much for the service you provide.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's a pleasure. It's awesome to have you guys as customers. Teresa, what about yourself? What's your little 1 minute story that you want to share with us today?
Oh gosh, like Sarah said, 1 minute. How can I keep it to 1 minute? So I'm in Grand.
Two will be allowed as well if needed.
So I'm in Grand Forks, which is the West Cooley boundary region of BC, Silks and Sinaiaks territory. And my introduction to cannabis began almost 30 years ago now. I attended HempFest with my dad. I think it was about 94 out in Salmo. It was the first HempFest that they'd had in Canada. And Jack Herrera was there, and the Reverends Tucker and Baldessaro from the Church of the Universe, which was that was my introduction to the other side of cannabis, that it wasn't just that people were, smoking weed. It was, this really meant a lot to people, and there was something else that was there. So my dad has been an activist. He's the mayor of Grand Forks here, and he's been a cannabis activist for years. So I started assisting him with hemp crop tours, harvesting, representing the crop in various capacities. And we brought together a group of cannabis activists from across Canada, and it was called the Canadian Cannabis Coalition. And that was in the late 90s. And this was, people were just kind of starting to use the internet. So coming together to meet all in person in one space was huge. And from that group, there was a lot of activities that launched. It was like an incubator. And so, we saw the formation of a national and provincial marijuana party out of that. I went and I ran for the marijuana party twice under that capacity. And then I went back to school and I finished my degree in social work with focus on drug policy and harm reduction. Sometime in there, my dad launched a cannabis health magazine. So I assisted in the publishing of that as production manager. I've assisted with growing operations, was a designated grower for a number of years as well. I guess on the side, I was working with unregulated producers in marketing and design and packaging, and continue to kind of do a little bit of that to this day. And so that's the other piece of it for me. And I also had a brief foray as a retailer prior to legalization, which didn't go so great for me. I really had a target on my back, but I learned a lot of things out of that experience. So that was just around the time that I met Sarah, and we were all called to Vancouver from, I was called by Riel Kapler, who I think we can call Dr. Riel Kapler now. And she said, there's this group of people getting together and we want to form something to help support these small farmers as they transition. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I guess that segues nicely into, your call to Vancouver along with Sarah, and I'm assuming that's where the Craft Cannabis Association of BC, the first seeds of it, was kind of formed. Can you guys speak to maybe a little bit of the history of your organization?
Yeah, Sarah and I we had a brief chat last night, and we had to laugh because when we first came together in that meeting, we were going to call ourselves a guild. And I think there was a collective laughter around that would guild. Like, sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings. So we had some moments of clarity, and I was like, okay, this is not the direction we need to go. And the term craft cannabis was not being widely used. And I think that was really fascinating for us. It was an opportunity there. So we had a chance to redirect the conversation and basically change the narrative. And that's what we originally launched with, was an approach to the public to kind of say, okay, this is where you get your cannabis from now. We're moving into legalization, and the format of what that will look like in the future might not match up with what you're getting now. And so how can we help to make sure that you continue to know where your cannabis comes from, that you can continue to support those small scale local producers? Sarah, do you want to?
I mean, I think our mission, of course, was to support small-scale producers. We met in Vancouver from various rural regions. That was sort of, the one place we could drive to an equal distance, kind of.
Yeah.
And really, like, it was starting from scratch with this narrative of what are small-scale producers as opposed to black market.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like Teresa has said, we really started with that sort of fear-based narrative, and we just hit the ground running and wrote a few papers, worked with a few other associations. One of the ones I'd like to reference is the Faces of Craft. We did that in partnership with the Canadian Drug Policy Association, I believe. There was a couple sort of big names in that group. And
what is Faces of Craft? This is the first time I'm hearing of it.
So we've got about 4 submissions that we made to the government during that preliminary prepping for legalization phase. And so there was one, I don't know if we've got all 3 papers, but we created a paper called Faces of Craft. It's on our website. You can download it. And it basically just...
And the website is craftcannabis.ca, I believe, for anybody who is watching this on YouTube who hasn't seen the link that Nick shared in the chat here.
Thank you, Sami. So it basically just, stated the case that we're not all, gangsters and criminals, and it...
In fact, mostly not.
Yes. I referenced the number.
I think it's less than 3% or less than 5% or something like that of anybody who had a conviction for cannabis-related activity had any other conviction for a violent crime or whatever. So that again, that narrative that we were hearing and that policy was developed off of, and I will be a broken record with this because this is what we're sort of slogging through now, is that the policies we're working with were based off of 2 factors: 1, protecting the children, and 2, eliminating black market criminals. So they were both fallacies, unfortunately, but now what we have to deal with is the residual effects of that. So that Faces of Craft was an opportunity for us to let these change makers know that wasn't the truth, that there was a lot of really good, hardworking farmers out there. And so that was another opportunity for us to shift the language into agriculture. And that's somewhere where we're still not quite there. There's still a bit of some work that needs to be done to continue to advocate for cannabis as an agricultural product. But that was one of our first attempts to kind of move the needle with that.
Like, we gave character sketches, like real examples of people without naming them, and explained how they contributed to their communities through the growing of their cannabis, the supplying of maybe to a local dispensary, and all the extra work they did with any money they made. They contributed to sports teams, trying to paint the picture of how our local economies actually do rely on these growers. And that narrative has absolutely continued. I do also want to say that at the very beginning, there was some significant financial contributions made by a few of our co-founders, and quite significant. And that allowed us to run this amazing campaign that attracted a lot of attention. And so, they had a machine behind it. We were able to really get rolling and things. And that became more difficult when the money ran out, and we found out that we couldn't fit into any traditional funding programs. And that's something we'll probably talk about as we get into what's working now versus what was not working then. There was no avenue for funding through traditional avenues for nonprofit associations. We're a nonprofit association.
And because at the time it hadn't been legalized yet, that is that what the challenge was, essentially?
Yeah, it had flat... And even though I think it was even when legalization happened 3 years ago, even then it wasn't hitting the government departments. So we would apply for a grant thinking we could qualify now, but we would get a flat out no, because they weren't told the education. It takes a while, I suppose. It
was always the fine print, right? It would be funding for economic development or for agriculture, but then it was like, but not cannabis, and so it was very, very challenging. And of course, wanting to maintain our integrity in messaging, we've had the opportunity along the way to receive funding from some larger producers, for example, and have been very hesitant about what that would mean for us. And so we've managed to make this work as volunteers for quite a while now. High five, Sarah.
That's incredible. I don't think everybody would stick to their integrity and to their values that strongly, where they would say no to a substantial amount of money if it was coming from a source that was in some ways diametrically opposed to the whole like craft cannabis vision that you're trying to craft here. And so good for you guys for sticking it out. And I'm glad you guys are still alive and well and here chatting with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, so not just the money, but there have been people along the way who've helped, all along the way. So just it takes an army. It takes a lot of folks to move this ball up the mountain that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, 100%. And I've like worked tangentially with you guys a few times around like direct delivery and farm gate, and know from experience just how much effort it takes and how many people have to like just be shouting the same message in a way that's cohesive, that's going to be heard by the right people. And it's just so much effort that has to go into anything of this sort, especially when there's just decades and decades and decades of stigma that we're trying to undo. And that's the real issue. I think that there's just like this inherent, deeply embedded stigma throughout a lot of society that leads to these ideas of, but what about the children, and all these narratives that don't actually match the reality of what it means to produce cannabis.
I mean, I think, we could lead into a little bit of what's going well.
Perfect. Don't even have to ask. You guys are on it. Amazing. Yeah, what's going well?
Finally, we are seeing, at least in BC, so that's something else that we've done. We came out with a national craft cannabis campaign during the preparation and the legalization of cannabis. And then we knew from the beginning, really, that we would have to focus on BC. So we needed to make sure that our province was going to shine, amongst all the provinces of Canada to ensure that our economies and our quality product will continue on into the future. So we've been working very hard with the provincial government over the last few years. It took us quite a while to establish the relationships. And, I think we're there now. And we met with the Minister of Agriculture, Minister Popham, and Minister Farnworth last year, and so they are actually communicating now. And
as in communicating between each other, or communicating with you guys? You mean
communicating with each other? Okay. So ministries are now, instead of it just being the Solicitor General of Health and Safety, they are now involving other ministries and looking at the potential for agriculture and economic development. And so, that's a super positive thing, and it takes a while, right? So they're finally shifting into this position, and hopefully.
And sorry to interrupt, Sarah. I'm just curious. When you say that they're talking together and they're talking about like possibilities, are you imagining something as drastic as the vision that I hope happens, which is the cannabis cultivation file gets taken from Health Canada and put into BC with the Ministry of Agriculture running that? Is that kind of the direction, or are we talking about like way less than that?
I don't. In our talks with the province, that's not something we're talking about right now, because I think what does need to happen, ultimately, it would be great for licensing of producers to be in the hands of BC. And that's something we did talk about at the very beginning. But it is going to take the province of BC to be asking for that from the federal government.
And that's a pretty big ask. It's not, and I'm sure they don't want to do that right now.
No, I think it's going to probably take a couple of years, really, like realistically. And it kind of fits in with the time frame of things that are happening right now, as far as the Cannabis Act review just beginning in October. It's supposedly going to go on for 2 years. So I think at the end of this next 2 years, we should hopefully see some kind of big shift. And that means we have a lot of work to do as far as, affording the government a measure of comfortability in trusting the industry to us, leaving it in our hands collectively, and fitting it in with our current systems, agriculture, being one of the main ones.
So I did kind of interrupt like at first, where you might have been going with the conversation around the two ministries talking to each other. Is there anything else you want to highlight in that kind of relationship that you see developing that's a positive thing, or is what we've just talked about there sufficient?
I would also add to that the optimism. I think that that's something that we've felt that has not been apparent to us, but we did, when the discussion started about Farmgate and direct to retail, we received sort of a preliminary briefing note on that. And it was amazing. I mean, Sarah and I stepped away and went, they're really excited about this. And there wasn't that talk about how do we protect people or what's going to go wrong. It was how do we take advantage of these opportunities? How can we support this industry? How can we build this here in BC? So that change has been really noticeable in the past, I would say, year and a half. So that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like a big part of that is kind of BC being way behind on all the metrics compared to where they expected to be, and kind of being like, oh shit, there's something that we've screwed up here? Do you feel like that was like a catalyst for that to emerge, or do you think it's something different than that?
I think part of it is trying to just navigate and work within the federal system, partly realizing that this was a really important, vital industry for British Columbia. And obviously the system needs to be tweaked. So how can we work with what we have control over, and what can we do to at least foster that as best as we can?
Yeah.
So it's probably twofold. Seeing the results of legalization and that it hasn't really panned out to be as beneficial as what they anticipated. And then also just rather than fighting it or going along with that federal narrative, how can we help support this and do what we can do with the system, right? So what we are seeing with that are programs, coming out of like Community Futures, for example. There's a new provincial sort of navigator that they've put up on their website that walks people through the steps of moving into a regulated market. And they're small things, but they're not insignificant. They're definitely showing that there is a desire to support the industry to grow and develop and transition.
Mm-hmm. And I think like we do need to think about the timeline here, right? So like legalization was announced, the provinces didn't really know what regulations were going to be, and then they had to come up with their own plan. And so it's happened very, very quickly. I mean, we live in our own bubble, understanding the industry, but for them, I mean, really,
it's all brand new.
They didn't know whether the sky was going to fall or not. And now, after really just a few years, it's only been 3 years, even though it feels like forever.
Yeah.
We've seen, and we repeat time and again, the sky has not fallen. There really is an economic opportunity here. So I think, given the timing of like even COVID and everything, we are able to, and we keep explaining that cannabis is an economic recovery option. Yeah. And so hopefully that will bring a sense of urgency maybe to support some things. I mean, it makes it more difficult when the healthcare is taking the priority at the moment.
Yeah.
I think we were on the verge of something really great right before COVID. There was a lot of discussion happening. There was a lot of momentum, forward movement. Community Futures, that program was amazing. And we engaged in a partnership with Community Futures Kootenays, as well as Community Futures here in the Cowichan Valley where I live.
Yeah.
And we were prepared for a fairly big program to basically extend those services that they offered there to this region as well, and then looking to other important regions within BC. And it was like the timing.
Yeah. All our funding's going to COVID now. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm pretty intimately familiar with that. It's been really sad to see that like BC was really ready. Like from my understanding, they wanted that program to go province wide, and then the funding was just had to go elsewhere, which is really unfortunate. And to your point, we had a few different ministries from the BC government on a previous State of Craft episode, and I found that really eye opening to just learn how like the policymakers, the bureaucrats that work within government like they had their hands tied behind their back. It was just a few months to come up with policies that really should have taken years, and so they just like tried their best, knowing that they weren't doing a good job because they just didn't have that time. And now I've like you guys have been really pleasantly surprised by my conversations with those ministries, because they do make me feel really excited, and it's so clear that they actually want to do better. They want to make things be just so much easier and more viable for small scale producers, and it doesn't feel like, you know, these people, they're the bureaucrats, not the politicians. So they're not the kind of people who are going to like be two-faced and just say one thing just to get your vote. They're not voted in. This is their jobs. So so I've been really stoked on, like, you know, what's the Cannabis Secretariat's office. I think they're doing amazing work. I really like the LCRB. I think have been doing fantastic.
Yep.
The BCLDB, I think they are trying to do well, but they've been like less inclusive, I felt, in their communications from what feedback I received from other people. But maybe that's not correct. I'm hoping that is not correct, and that they are like really open to that as well. But it's been really awesome seeing the BC government and how much they're trying to make things work for small scale producers.
Totally. I mean, that's sort of, you know, there's probably other things that are going well that we can mention along the way. I mean, I think one of the big problems is the centralized distribution. You know, having our supply chain in general is pretty ridiculous, is the word I used earlier. And the BCLDB, I mean, the whole centralized distribution was built around big production, you know, big business, big alcohol, essentially.
And in a world where there's only ultimately 6 companies, something like that, 5 or 6 companies that supply the entire alcohol industry, everybody else is like selling to them, and then they or owned by them. So they're used to working with 6 companies. That model doesn't translate to hundreds of companies.
No, with small batches of product that, you know, is not
degrades over time.
So, I mean, I think it's been quite the learning curve, you know, for them. And, you know, we can complain about quite a few things, but look, luckily we do have these new programs coming in 2022, including direct to retail for small scale producers. And I think that's really going to make a difference. Like, you know, it was kind of ridiculous to have, you know, their only option to be like one type of cannabis, one strain on the shelf, you know, and you would have a no if you were a producer of the same black cherry punch or whatever, if you produced it and it was already on the shelf, they would just say no. And just like a lack of understanding around variety and the grower and cannabis itself is not, it's not like alcohol. So, I mean, there is a lot of learning to be had. And I think direct delivery is going to hopefully open up doors. There's also considerations to be made there and difficulties given the supply chain and the fact that we have to, you know, there's processing licenses and cultivation licenses. And if there's one thing I'd like to see change into the future, it would be that cultivators can get a simple processing license to package their own flower and perhaps, you know, make solventless concentrates.
Yeah.
You know, where you don't require
it's just water and ice.
You know, like you're tapping it with a, you know, pollinator, you know, a screen. You don't need chemicals and equipment and like high tech, you know. So hopefully that's something I think that a lot of folks across the country are asking for, and I think that's definitely going to be at the top of our list for asks within the Cannabis Act review coming up.
So before we move on from this topic on supply chain, what's your experience or view? What's your experience been like with the BCLDB? Do you feel like they have been pretty what's the word I want to find here? Receptive to thoughts and because that's something I've heard from other organizations that they've been a lot more like closed. Does that match your experience, or do you feel like they are receptive?
So we just got licensed in May. And so we just are starting our communication directly with the BCLDB. Before that, we did communicate as an association. We asked them to come to a few different meetings that we have with various ministries, and they were extremely silent. We did have a couple of preliminary conversations with with a buyer, for example. But it was, I think personally that they're just really, in the past, I don't know about today, but in the past, it seemed like there was maybe a lack of understanding about cannabis specifically as a product, and they weren't necessarily forthcoming with much, you know. Like they were sort of hiding behind a curtain. And I understand that too. If you're dealing with a brand new product and you're trying to fit it into your existing system that services another product, but I can say that since I know that there's a few people, Janine Davies in particular, has done some amazing work with some of the folks at the BCLDB and in helping microcultivators in particular. And so we are seeing that now with our communication with the BCLDB, that they are super supportive of BC small scale companies. And I think they recognize the importance of us having these products, BC based products in BC. That's, because of the supply chain, we, for example, have partnerships with processors that are not in BC. That's just sort of the nature of the beast at the moment.
Yeah.
And so, it makes it challenging if BC wants to support BC producers, but we are a BC cultivator who has to work with an out of province processor. And, it's sort of difficult to make that work. But I think that that they're open and sort of looking at how that can happen and recognizing that we are BC based and how do we bring that forward to consumers.
Cool. Teresa, what's the thing that you think is not going so great that you would like to see change?
Well, Sarah knows I complain about packaging all the time. And I think that's, my background in both graphic design and marketing. And I see from a retail perspective as well, that origin story is lost. We just don't have the real estate on packages to be able to express where did this product come from? What's the story there? How can I help to build that relationship with the consumer when I have, like an emblem and like a very, very limited amount of information. So
would you like a logo or a slogan? Pick one.
It's fascinating, but again, these are policies that are made on the heels of that fear-based kind of perspective. And so, not being able to include depictions of animals, for example, and, you can't have anything shiny. And I hate to draw parallels to alcohol, but I would say I would love for us to be at the place that we see happening with alcohol, right? You can have some really great artwork. You can explain that story. You can draw people to your website. You can help to build that relationship. And so that's something where I think we really need to see a shift, because otherwise it falls on the retailers who don't necessarily have the time as a bud tender to say, if somebody comes in, they say, okay, well, what do you have and where is it from and how is this cured? And you don't have time for those conversations. So that information needs to be told in a different way.
And it's that lack of connection to the producer, really, right? So how do you, as a consumer, you go in and you're like, I want to support craft, and those bud tenders don't necessarily know which products are craft producers or not, and this is sort of where we came up with a certification. And we knew from the beginning, so we developed that craft certification basically from day one. And it's becoming more and more obvious as the industry progresses how important this is. And so we have asked, and this will be something else we put forward with the Cannabis Act review, is that we need to be able to have certifications on packaging. So whether that be organic, whether it be regenerative, or whether it be craft, like true craft, we want consumers to be able to identify those products easily. And so in the meantime, we're gonna, do what we can outside of packaging and use other methods. But essentially, like, it's just gonna become so key that we shouldn't have to look at a map of like the big LPs and the little guys and try to figure out like who's who and who do you don't want to support and not want to support. Hopefully you can just look and see our awesome little logo and trust that you're supporting a small scale producer when you see it.
Yeah. But then there's also the challenge of at a store, like the packaging's not out there. I haven't been to a retail store in a little while now, but like from my memories, it's all like hidden away somewhere and you just have a menu that you pick. So So
the menu shows things, right? So
what depends on the retailer as well. And I think the idea of designated crafts shelf space is something that we're seeing the province is interested in, and retailers are interested in that as well. And your experience when you walk into a BC liquor store, for example, you can easily discover where a product is from. You know which corner you're going to find your craft beer. You know that when you're standing in the BC wine section, that all that wine is from BC. That those things are laid out in a way that consumers can understand and relate with. And I think that that's something we're seeing retailers moving towards as well, where they say, okay, all of our BC products are here, or all of our craft products are here. Mm-hmm. So that's helpful. And I think we'll see more of that.
Cool. Hey, just want to take a moment here, Bob. I've seen a lot of messaging from you here on the side. I just want to point out Community Futures Central Kootenays has helped 50 different producers get their licenses here. About half to a third of the micro licenses in BC all came as a result of this program. Free services to help people. They have gone out of their way to make lives way easier for growers in this area. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't call them bureaucrats, because they are amazing humans. And government is full of all kinds of different people. Some are awesome, some are less so, just like anybody else in humanity. And can't just lump everybody into one thing. I hear that you've had some pretty shitty experiences being in the legacy world since *65, but there's some amazing people who are going out of their way to help people. So I just want to share that, because I'm not too into the disrespect that I've been feeling coming from you.
It's true, though. I mean, that's the thing, right? There's sort of the good actors, the bad actors. So that's been one of our challenges, is really to make sure that, you gotta find the good folks, and there's tons of them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, like we said earlier, there's lots of people in government who really are trying, and there's lots of people who aren't. There's lots of people who do not want to see this succeed, who have their own personal vendetta against cannabis, who have stigma deep inside, or people who are in bed with the large LPs, their rich white friends that come from oil and gas, and they just want to help them stay rich and keep the craft growers down. There's definitely a lot of that I feel as well, but that's not everybody.
Reality is, we live in municipalities, in a province, in a country, and that's so true. There's people who sit on various boards and, approve various grants and loans and things like that, who have stigma, and then those who are actually cannabis users, who are cannabis friendly. And so it's just like finding allies, really trying to change minds slowly but surely. There's people who have never had a cannabis experience in their lives, and they're the head of a particular grant, for example. And so it's just like being able to shift their mindset so that they're open and interested in supporting a new, exciting economy and small business. We've done that ourselves. We have an example, I won't name any names, but someone who was really just against cannabis, just had some bad experiences. And after working with Teresa and I, this person ended up chatting with their neighbor who was growing cannabis. The neighbor gave them some cannabis to end up making a product, an oil, a topical. And she said this would have never happened if it wasn't for sort of our chats with her and things. So it's just like that. It takes forever. It's very slow. But I think we all have that responsibility in a way. I'd like for everybody to feel that, just like if we can just each take our time to represent the industry well, we're just we need to move the dial.
Yeah.
I think, Sarah, that's a great segue too into another thing that we're doing right. We've been hosting an event at the UBCM. So the Union of BC Municipalities meets yearly, and we've been, how long has it been? This was our
fourth year.
Yeah. So we have a party, essentially. At least we used to pre-COVID, and brought all these people together. And it's just this fabulous opportunity to meet with municipal representatives and regional directors. And they're often very excited. And so that's been a really mainstream opportunity for us to throw these events and to engage people in that forum. And so we just finished up the UBCM just last month. And we had, how many, Sarah? 60
this year, more last year. It's virtual, so it's a little different.
This is 60 municipalities, you mean?
Representatives. So whether they're city councilors or mayors, regional directors. And so they can stop by our booth, and we shared with them information that we had on Farmgate, and really tried to present that as a positive opportunity for their communities. And we were there and open for any questions they might have about that moving forward. And so we just really, it's a great opportunity for us to normalize cannabis in a space where you wouldn't necessarily see something like that. And so, we have a booth next to, whether it's Fortis or whomever, and it's like, wow, we're kind of legit here. So it's pretty good.
Yeah. And the team at the Union of BC Municipalities has been incredibly supportive from the beginning. We've done basically the smallest reception you can host is what we've done for the last few years. I mean, I'm really looking forward to one of these years when we can host one of the big ones. And that means you can have more people in a room, because we're really limited at the sponsorship level that we go in on. We're limited to 150 people. But that's a lot. That's a lot of folks. We normally bring in 20 industry professionals, people from all different avenues of the industry, to sit around a table and have food and discussion around the future of this industry and the possibilities. And so,
what are some things? Are there any concrete things that you feel have come out of some of the past 4 UBCMs that you've attended that you can talk about here today?
I mean, in general, I hope that there's definitely, I think the first few in particular were really supportive municipalities, people in municipalities that were supportive, and their comments were, oh my God, it's just so nice to see other people in the room that they would have never have known are also supportive of cannabis. So I think that they're building relationships even behind the scenes that we're not necessarily aware of in communication. We provided recommendations for all the cannabis resolutions that occur at the UBCM. In the first couple of years, there was quite a few. There was one year where there was 10 or so. This year, there was only 2 cannabis resolutions. It depends, I suppose, on what's happening within each region. But so I think that folks have definitely said to us that education the background that we provide around those resolutions has helped them vote and make decisions.
And I've heard, because I've chatted with the RDCK here and the Kootenays, and some people I've talked to here have said that the UBCM has made and your involvement in it has made a pretty big difference for them and how they're thinking about cannabis. So that's just the one group that I talked to that happened to attend there in the region that I live. So that's great that there's that feedback.
And I think also, the sad thing is there's municipalities that are really struggling right now with, resource downturn and resource extraction and things like that. And so just to be able to chat with them and have them see the possibilities and the potential and the optimism around small scale cannabis in particular has been, I think, it helps when you feel like there's some hope maybe for your region and hopefully bringing that back to the table too.
Sorry, 1 second, Sarah, before you go on, I just want to let our audience know we're getting really close to, in fact, we are at Q&A time. We'll go a bit longer because there's only been 1 question so far. If you have questions, we have a dedicated question tab. You can upvote questions that you like, and in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, we'll start going through them, and Sarah and Teresa will answer them. So yeah, please do ask questions there if you have any. Marty, ask your question about what you want to talk about in there, and then we'll get to that. So yeah, Sarah, do you remember what train of thought you were on, or did I cut you off too hard there for that to stay there?
There's something there, but it's okay. It's all good. I'm sure it'll come out again if it's important.
Okay, so then before we get into the Q&A here, what are some final thoughts you guys have? What are some really critical issues that you think need to be addressed that we haven't touched on yet? What are some shifts that you want to see that you think will make a huge difference for the legal craft cannabis industry? What do you do? I'd like each of you to answer that question with whatever personally you think is going to be most impactful.
Mm-hmm. I think what we're hearing from change makers again is that they want to hear a unified voice coming from us. So I think finding issues where we align, whether it's with other organizations, producers of any scale, and making sure that those messages are very clear moving forward as we make an appeal to the federal government. I think that that's vital. And I think the time for that is now. Like Sarah was saying, I think we've got, I thought it was 18 months, but somewhere in around 18 months to 2 years to be able to affect some of that change.
Are you talking about like the Health Canada review here? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So to be able to make sure that our messaging around that is cohesive and that we can all kind of get behind a few sort of particular items that are important to us. And, one of those was excise tax that Dan Sutton had brought up with in your last State of Craft episode. That's something that a lot of people can agree on. And so can we help to deliver a unified voice about that? Like I had stated, I'm really all about the packaging. I would love to see us have some sort of campaign to ease some of that up. So that's...
And sorry, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can go to standforcraft.com to automatically send a message around that excise tax issue to a whole bunch of change makers in government. And I think Bill Logan shared that link in the side here as well. So go ahead and click that link and add your voice if you haven't yet, because the more people submit that, the more likely this is actually going to change at a quick pace. Sorry to interrupt, Teresa. I just wanted to get that shout out in.
And I think to add on to that, I think making a really concerted effort to touch base with your own municipal, not municipal, but your own MP. So your member of parliament that's in your community, to make a connection with them and to call and sit down and have a meeting and say, here's the things that could really help me and my business. Here's the things that can help me and my community, because their voices will be heard as well. And so I think now is a great time to start reaching out and working on that advocacy on a real grassroots level.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, Sarah, what's your final thoughts?
I'm going to tie in Marty's question about like direct retail Farmgate. I mean, I think talking to your municipalities right now is really important. If you're in the industry, and if you're not, but you want to see Farmgate products in your neighborhood, if you think that's something that's going to fit, now is the time to be having those discussions. Everything takes a long time with government in general, but with municipalities, it takes that much longer. And there definitely are stigma issues that exist within these smaller communities and the folks that sit on those councils. So, I think we're coming up with, we've got a few documents that we'd like to, I think, share with folks that want to have those conversations locally.
Awesome.
I'd like to see municipalities maybe pay a little bit more attention to the existing cannabis industry or, the producers within their regions. So we have, we're currently working with the Cowichan Valley Regional District. We're conducting a survey of the legal and the unregulated cannabis market within this region to come up with some baseline data for what the industry looks like today. And hopefully, we'll see some progress over the next few years. When this is complete, I think that could be something that could be used in other municipalities as well. That's going to hopefully be like a domino effect. But really, policies need to be developed now to allow for Farmgate next year.
So Sarah, is this research that you're talking about that you want to publish, is that the document you're referring to, or is there a different document
we've got a basic kind of like, what is Farmgate? Why is it good for your community? Things you should be aware of. We use it at the UBCM, so I think we'll probably get that posted on our website or something, and folks can email us if they'd like to use it to communicate with municipalities.
So for those people who are watching this right now who do want to make that happen, how can they access it? Are you open to sharing your email, or is there a link you can post in the chat?
Anybody that wants to chat with us after today is welcome to email hello@craftcannabis.ca, and you'll get a response from someone in our association. And like I said, we'll try to have a look at all the documents we have posted there right now. You'll see where we're coming from, and the messaging has been very much the same from the beginning, and we'll try to get that document up there as well.
And I will say as well that something that I found has been very effective in the Kootenay region is actual tours, taking people who are on city council, who are in regional districts, and just letting them actually see a facility, because that dissolves so much of the stigma once they see, oh, it's just a normal farm, and you're just a normal human, and I can actually ask you questions and you'll answer, and it'll be respectful. And I realize through experience that everything that I had in my brain about this thing is wrong. So if any of you guys listening to this are licensed and you have a facility and you haven't had much luck with your local government, I'd really encourage you to invite them for a visit and a tour so they could learn, because that has done wonders here locally.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, with all that being said, why don't we see what kind of questions we have for you guys? We have 2 questions right now. Bill Logan's question is most upvoted, so we'll start with that. Is there any interest in using the BC Craft Association to springboard into a national body? You guys are head and shoulders of leaders in the country in my eyes, but we're not in BC. Happy to help here in Ontario. Smiley face.
Yeah. I'll take a stab first at this. So we've definitely we've thought about it, and we've gone so far as sort of beginning the process of doing that. But there needs to be some coordination. And so what we realized is, again, our focus needs to be in BC. We encourage other organizations to form in their own provinces, and happy to work with them. And I think, from that evolves maybe a national organization. We're not like, it's a lot of work to try to build a national organization and then, attack all the different provinces with, similar, and things are happening so quickly that I think it really does need to be provincially focused. But that said, we should be working together. So I know Alberta has a great association, the ACMLA. We've had a few emails from Ontario folks who are interested in starting an association. So I think if there's a way for us to put those people together, and they've asked us for our guidance and mentorship. I mean, we didn't have a lot of experience to begin with. I think we have learned a lot in the last few years. So maybe happy to provide some guidance, and just working together on various projects would allow for that. But anybody who is thinking in other provinces of doing this, for sure, reach out to us. And if there's a way for us to put people together in those provinces, I think that's probably the way to go for now.
Cool. Thank you for that. And yeah, the other thing to add to that is that, half of the cannabis supply chain, the retail and distribution and sale angle of it is all provincially handled. So there's major differences between the models to a certain degree, but also just the approach and just the types of conversations that need to happen in each province. So, and that makes it really challenging to have a national conversation, because every province is different. The production side, that's federally regulated, so that's something that can happen. But then there's questions like wanting to bring in the agricultural cannabis file to the Ministry of Agriculture here in BC, where there is appetite for that, and it would make things a lot easier for producers here. And then you have a province like Alberta that doesn't have a Ministry of Agriculture. So it's really hard as a national organization to fight for these kinds of things when the playing field is very different from one province to the next. So I do think some form of advocacy organization that's federal makes a lot of sense and is necessary to some capacity. But I totally think that the right approach is what you said, Sarah, which is each province has their own thing, and then maybe once a quarter they meet together as a group and just have a conversation, figure out what can we align on federally.
The thing is, people might know this or not know this, but people in the cannabis industry are very particular. We feel like we all have our own ways about growing plants and doing things. And so we're very headstrong folks, I think.
Just ask anybody what their definition of craft cannabis is.
Totally. So I think it's just finding people that you can work with, that you work well with, that you can actually accomplish some things, and just go with it until we're a little further along, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, we have one more question, which this is a bit different from what you answered to Marty's question live, which is, why aren't all processors being included in direct delivery? I will answer that with my opinion first, and then I'll hand it over to you guys. I think a big part of it is that the system that exists today has really been made for large scale facilities. It's made for those big LPs that have all the full gamut of license types and have big budgets. There's been a lot of restrictions in place, like needing to have prohibitively expensive recall insurance and all these things that have essentially made it that you cannot sell into the legal market without going through one of the large LPs. So this is a response to that of, well, the big people don't have anything blocking them from getting to market. It's the small players that do. So let's do what we can so that we can cut out a middleman, make it so it's more accessible, make it so there isn't this bottleneck for these small scale producers who don't have a big understanding of the enterprise world, which is what all the provincial distribution boards have been expecting. So that's kind of my take on that. It's really to enable the people who have been hurt by the current regime. And so it's in BC anyway. It's limited to 3,000 kilograms of cannabis processed a year or less. I don't know if you guys have a different thought or anything to add to that, but
I think in my mind, nothing is ever really carved in stone. I think that the program's going to roll out next year. There's lots of discussion still happening. The problem is the way the licensing is set up. Right. So we have these instances where you have to have a processing license and a sales amendment, and those things take an incredible amount of resources, money, and time. And so, small producers are less likely to be able to do so. And it's the trouble of like building a program for the future. We hope that maybe some of those regulations and costs and things are going to be reduced for small producers. So you have the program as it exists today, and you have what you envision it might be in a few years. And how do you build policy to take you through from now until then? And I think the challenge is also really about like, if we're talking about, are we talking about direct to retail in particular?
Yeah, it was about direct delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will also include in that the province is really looking for initiatives to help bring unregulated producers into the market, and they want to find things that are appealing to those people. And I think that some of this comes from that as a strategy. Who is currently holding back? What would lure them into coming forward and being included? And maybe this is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And Marty, I want to just make it clear that I agree with you. I think having a centralized distribution system is just bad, period. Like there should be no reason for a government to say, hey, we're going to be the buyers in between the cannabis nerds that grow weed and the cannabis nerds that want to sell it. Like let the cannabis nerds talk to each other and just figure out what they want to sell. Like I think the whole idea of a centralized system is bad, but the perspective I shared earlier is more just kind of my take on the government and why they're approaching it in this kind of way.
And I mean, that's the ultimate challenge, and that's a challenge for our association in particular. And that's why we think it's really important that we exist as an association and a voice for small scale producers. We're really always going to be advocating for them. Whatever we can do to provide them opportunity. I mean, we do have to work with larger processors at the moment. And I mean, that's a reality. So, whatever we can arrange with the government to allow us to get to market, I think they're going to be supportive of. But we do want to protect the small scale producers into the future, not just looking at today, but what is it going to look like in another 5 years?
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thanks.
Cool. And Kirk Tusa adds, Kirk.
Hi, Kirk.
Don't ask not a question in the question section,
Oh, no.
But he says not a question, but note that BC has not finalized either the direct delivery or farm gate rules. So if you want to provide input, contact your local MLA, the relevant ministers, and or the BC LDB.
Yes.
So
make them work at it.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions, unless somebody triggers something real quick here. Any last thoughts you guys want to share, Teresa or Sarah?
I want to thank everybody for participating in the chats that have been going on. I've been sort of watching on the side, and I just know everybody's passionate, like we all care so much about this. And I hope the industry became fragmented when licensing happened. We all kind of got busy doing what we needed to do and off in our own directions. And I'm hoping that the Cannabis Act review maybe is going to be a good opportunity for us to come back together and work together and, appreciate how far we've all come in the last few years and celebrate some of that stuff.
Awesome. Teresa, anything you want to add?
That's great. I agree with Sarah.
I agree with Sarah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the future, and like I said, I think that the change in how we're hearing the government talk to us has been a big part of that. That I just am really seeing a lot of support coming from a wide range of areas, and so farm gate and agritourism, and building up the industry from a people-focused place is something that's really, really it's exciting for us. So,
This was great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was the Craft Cannabis Association of BC. Next up, we have Timothy Dayton from Sweetgrass, Sweetgrass Organic Cannabis. They are one of the first licensed micros here in the Kootenays, based out of Weimar, BC. They operate 2 different microcultivation, microprocessing facilities, and they have been through the gauntlet with Health Canada, and I'm sure Tim has a lot to share about that. They've been waiting on a sales amendment for 8 or 9 months now, and they're very they got a lot of stories to share, I think, about that's kind of the downside of being one of the first people to get licensed, which they were, is the learning experience for both you as a producer and for the government as people interacting with those producers. It's all new, right? So thanks to all the trailblazers out there that got licensed first, that have set the made shifts. Like, one of our the first licensed micro in the Kootenays is one of our customers, and he was forced to build a fence and have all these security cameras and do all these things that, as a result of conversations with him and others, they're like, now micros don't have to do that. They're like, okay, no, this is a bit overkill. But he was forced to spend all this extra money, all this extra time, all this extra stress just to meet the regs at the time. And he's gone with the flow with it. But yeah, it's a lot easier now for anybody applying for a micro license than it was 2-3 years ago.
Yep. Kudos to those pioneers for sure.
So yeah, one of them is going to be our next guest. So if you're curious to hear the perspective of somebody who has lots to share around that and who's involved with a few different advocacy organizations here in BC, that'll be our next guest. This has been the State of Craft episode 13. And thank you again, Teresa and Sarah, for your time today.
Thank you, Sami. Bye.
Thanks, Thanks, Nicholas.
And thanks everybody who's been here watching. We appreciate the lively conversation today. And anybody watching on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. See you guys.
There.